What's going on, Raider Nation? This is Vinny Bonsignore, Raider Nation, Vegas Nation. What's going on? The question, whatever, hit up. Can't wait to get started. And we already have a question from Charles A. Vinny, are the Raiders fully sold on Daniel Carlson because they released Dominic Eberle? Or was this based on needing roster spots for other positions? I thought some competition at kicker would have been good. Well, Charles, I think it's a couple of, a little bit of both of what you're saying. Number one, I do think that there's confidence in the building, obviously, for Daniel Carlson. He showed 2 years ago what, how capable he was as a kicker. The Raiders signed him after the Vikings released him his rookie year. He came on strong. For the Raiders, he was kicking really well to start last season in 2019, but then got a little bit of hiccups towards the end of the year, and it wasn't good. It was ugly, and obviously it sent him into an offseason, and the Raiders into an offseason of some questions, and no doubt they signed Dominic Eberle out of Utah State as an undrafted free agent, but unfortunately for him, I think the combination of the Raiders being comfortable with Daniel Carlson and then also having to get to that 80-man roster limit, which they have to get to by this Sunday, August 16th. I think it really limited the options for Dominic Eberle, and as a result, he ended up getting released, and they're going to go with Daniel Carlson. There doesn't appear to be much competition for him. He's going to have to show it. And I think he is. He's a talented kicker. I don't know what happened last year, but if he's past those struggles, then I think the Raiders are in good shape when it comes to the kicking position. So I welcome all you guys to send your questions. I'm here for as long as that's going to take. As long as you're sending me questions, looking forward to it. And I do have some other questions that have been coming in. And I'll get right to those. PTA, Pardon the Idiot, at Pardon the Idiot on Twitter, wants to know what the real expectations for Brian Edwards are based on the early reviews, and what are the coaches saying about him? Well, needless to say, Brian Edwards has made a pretty big impact so far, and left a really nice impression thus far on Raiders coaches, and specifically quarterback Derek Carr. He was raving about him last week. Derek was, when we talked to him, and had some great compliments for him. He said, and kind of what you see on film if you watch him at South Carolina last year. Edwards is a big 6'3", 220-pound physical wide receiver, and as Derek explained to us, he's a violent pass route runner. In what he meant was he's physical, and he could use his body to ward off defenders, even when he's running pass routes and getting after it and being physical in that regard. But even more important to that, what he does on film, and I think this is going to translate really well into the NFL, is he uses his size and his physicality to go get the ball on those 50-50 balls, especially near the end zone. When you need a first down at the first down marker, he's going to go up and get it. So as far as his projections, it's tough to say. There's one football and a whole bunch of playmakers that the Raiders have when you're talking about Henry Ruggs and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow, and now Bryan Edwards. Add him to the mix, and Lynn Bowden, their rookie from Kentucky. But I think it's safe to say that 30 to 40 targets, 30 to 40 catches, a handful of touchdowns. I think he's going to be using in the red zone. Obviously, it'll come down to his command of the playbook. But so far so good in that regard, and so far so good when they have gotten on the field. We'll get a better look at him beginning tomorrow when actual football practices start. There's a 4-day ramp-up period for that, and that leads the Raiders into full pads, 14 fully padded practices beginning on August 17th. And I think that's when we're really going to get a handle on Bryan Edwards when it gets to that level. And whether they're going to be able to count on him early. But I think 30 to 40 targets is pretty feasible for young Bryan Edwards. And I think it's a good thing. I listening to Derek talk to him and rave about him, you get the feeling that he's going to make an impact pretty early on in his Raiders career. We're going to go to Cordell at Crown and Cigar on Twitter. And what he asks is, I think Raider Nation knows what the starting defensive front seven will look like. Give us an idea what the starting secondary will be and who will start in the nickel. Also, who will be the starting kick and punt returners. Thanks. I wouldn't doubt to see a little bit of Lynn Bowden, maybe Damon Arnett as the punt returner. Also, Hunter Renfrow showed some of that toward the end of last year, so don't be surprised to see him in special teams. As far as kickoff, it's a rarely used position these days, except when opposing teams are trying to challenge you to return it. But we'll see. I think it's probably one of the rookies that you'll see in that regard. But I'll have a better idea starting tomorrow when we can actually get on the field and watch these guys practice on who is returning punts and kickoffs. As far as the secondary, well, I think you've got Trayvon Mullen at one cornerback position. I think he made a strong impression over the second half of last season. Showed a lot of ability, a lot of tenacity, coverage skills. Wasn't afraid to mix it up, get in there and get dirty and physical as a tackler. I think he solidified himself as one starter. And opposite him, obviously the Raiders drafted Prince Amukamara, they drafted Damon Arnett from Ohio State with the 19th pick overall, but they also maybe covered the base a little bit by signing veteran Prince Amukamara from the Chicago Bears. I think that Prince probably gets the nod early on, but Damon Arnett, they drafted him for a reason, and I suspect that he's going to find his way to the field early on. I think the safeties are pretty set. Jonathan Abrams at one safety spot and veteran Demarius Randall at the other. I think the Raiders are in pretty good shape on the back end of their defense. Abram was really a revelation last year, early in training camp, and then preseason, first game of the season. Unfortunately, he got hurt and was out for the rest of the year after that first game. Raiders are counting on him to bring a physicality and a force in the run game and in pass coverage. And I think Randall, with his ability to cover, played a lot of cornerback in his career in addition to safety. They've really kind of solidified that position with Jeff Heath, who they signed from the Dallas Cowboys, and Eric Harris as the primary backups. As far as nickel, well, right off the bat, you got to start talking about LaMarcus Joyner. He's the returning slot quarterback. He did struggle a little bit in that role. The Raiders did draft Amik Robertson from Louisiana Tech in the 4th round. He's going to be given every opportunity to get on the field. He brings a tenacity and a physicality and really, really good cover skills, which to me, if you watch the tape, I think that's an area that if it translates from college to the NFL, he's going to have an ability to um, to be a factor early on. So we'll see where that goes. But Amik Robertson, Nevin Lawson is going to be in your packages. Depending on who that starter is on one cornerback. You'll see either Damon Arnett come in as a nickel back or Prince Amukamara. So let's go on to the next question. Raider Ron at Mac Bacom Boys. What is going to be the most contested position group leading up to the season? Well, I think that secondary is going to have some, there's going to be some fights. And I think that the LaMarcus Joyner, Amik Robertson battle is worth watching. And I also think the Prince Amukamara and Damon Arnett battle is worth watching. I think that, in both cases, the Raiders are in pretty good shape from a veteran standpoint at both of those positions, the cornerback position and the slot cornerback position. But they drafted Arnett and they drafted Robertson for a reason. They believe in him. They think that they're going to be able to get on the field and contribute. And in talking to Amik Robertson, I haven't had a chance to talk to Damon yet, but I get the sense that he kind of feels the same way. They're confident and they're ready to get after it and they're ready to compete. Robertson, he's 5'8", but he plays like he's 6'2", and he brings it. And he's a football player, and I don't think anything phases him. And he's going to bring that kind of chip on his shoulder because he thinks and believes that he should have been drafted higher. He didn't. The measurables in terms of the size and everything weren't quite there. But he's a guy that I think believes that he can be an NFL player and an asset on an NFL team, and he's going to have every chance to show it. So I would watch that slot quarterback and cornerback opposite Trayvon Mullen. Let's go to Jesus Jimenez at 86 Chewy 68. Which rookie that we haven't heard of yet is going to get some positive attention from the coaching staff? Again, we football practice basically starts tomorrow on Wednesday, and then there'll be 4 days of a ramp up where you're wearing your helmets, and then for 2 days, and then the next 2 days you got your helmets and shoulder pads. But it's going to be football related activity that leads to next Monday, August 17th, when they're going to finally put the pads on. And I think that's when we're really going to start hearing about some guys, because we're going to be able to see them in a football setting. But I mentioned Amik Robertson. He hasn't gotten a whole lot of talk thus far in talking to the coaches. But I think once they do get the pads on, he's able to show, the physicality that I talked about and the tenacity and the coverage skills. I think you're going to start hearing about him. Tanner Muse, I think he's got a bright future. He's making the transition from safety to linebacker. I think it'll go fairly smoothly. He's an intelligent player, highly athletic player. And his ability to play the run but also defend the pass, I think, is something that obviously the Raiders didn't have a lot of at that position last year. They're going to need it. They feel like they addressed that with Corey Littleton and Nick Witkowski in free agency. But I think Tanner Muse and also Javin White, the undrafted rookie from UNLV, I think both of those guys are going to be a factor at that other linebacker position. So Amik, Tanner Muse, those are two rookies, and Javin that I would keep an eye on, that are kind of flying under the radar a little bit. So let's see what we have here as far as questions. Thanks for participating, by the way. Really appreciate it. Let's see what we got here. All right, we're gonna go to let's see here. Sorry for the delay here. Okay. With all the new, this is from Real Recognized Real at Marley G _17th. With all the new weapons on the outside, where does Zay Jones fall on the roster? Well, the thing is, he brings speed. Unfortunately, he was brought in mid-season last year, and that's hard to do. Is make a mark, especially at wide receiver, where you don't necessarily have that, chemistry with the quarterback. But Zay Jones, I know, is out there with with Derek Carr during the offseason and the impromptu workouts at local parks. So they were, beginning to build a chemistry, which I think is really needed. And I think he does bring quickness and speed. And that's something that you just can't teach. So with an off season, even though it was condensed, but he did get out there on the field with Derek, and then a full training camp, to the extent that we're having full training camps. I think that he could still be a factor. And the good news is he's not going to be asked to start unless there's an injury or something like that. But he's definitely somebody that you feel comfortable with in a reserve role. Like if something does happen, or if you need him in certain packages, you've got Zay Jones, a veteran that you can turn to. That wasn't always the case these last couple of years, where you went to real inexperience and uncertainty in the backup roles. But now you got Zay Jones. I think he finds his way onto this to a way to stay on the football team and be a factor when called upon. So I'm interested to see what he's able to do now with a full off season and getting to work from day one on with the Raiders. It was tough for him last year coming in as a trade situation. We're going to go to Spitfire 2328 at Spitfire 2328. Derek Carr's favorite quarterback was Brett Favre. Do you think he's capable of doing some of the things he did, playing off script sometimes and pushing the envelope? Would Gruden allow it? That's a good question, because John Gruden, who was on the Packers staff when Brett Favre was there, that was always sort of a point of contention. Sometimes, when you go off script the way Brett Favre did. But I'll tell you a funny story. There's a guy by the name of Pat Kerwin, and he hosts a radio show on NFL Network on Sirius XM, and he used to coach with Pete Carroll, and so Pat was on the staff with Pete Carroll with the New York Jets, and they acquire Ronnie Lott, the great safety for the San Francisco 49ers and Oakland Raiders, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they bring in Ronnie Lott, and they're walking him through certain coverage schemes and defensive schemes, and Pete's on the field with them, and he says to Ronnie Lott, look, when you see this or X, Y, and Z, when the offense is lined up, and you see this, and that. And he walks over to a point in the field. And he's like, "This is where I need you to be. When that happens, this is where you need to be." And according to Pat Kerwin, Ronnie Lott said, "Hey, coach, I can't make a promise that I'm going to be there every time." And Pete Carroll kind of looked at him. He was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Coach," Ronnie Lott says, "Coach, sometimes I see things and I just go make a play." And Pete Carroll basically said, "Ronnie, keep doing what you're doing," because he respected Ronnie Lott and he knew and understood, look, sometimes you have to go off script, like Spitfire is saying, and push the envelope or go make a football play. And so while Gruden definitely wants his quarterbacks to follow the script, so to speak, I think even he understands, hey, sometimes a quarterback needs to go make a play. And I think he's trying to give, Derek some leeway and some confidence to do just that in certain situations. Not always. You don't go off the script all the time. That's chaos. You have to follow your progressions. You have to get the ball where the ball is intended to go. That's coaches spend all week looking for the big, for the mismatches that they feel like they can exploit. And when they get the look that they want the quarterback to go, take the ball where it's supposed to go, because that's the matchup that they've identified. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And sometimes, whatever the case might be, that guy might be covered. You might not have gotten the look that you were thinking that you were going to get. There might be a blocking breakdown, and all of a sudden the quarterback has to make some plays. And I think that John Gruden is encouraging Derek Carr in those kind of situations, especially, when we need 5 yards, for the first down to keep this drive alive. Don't be afraid to put the ball under your arm and take off running and go get that 5 yards that we need. So I don't think that he wants him to do it all the time. That's just not how John Gruden operates. But I think there are certain situations where he encourages Derek Carr to do just that. Let's go to Kobe Coldface. Love that name. At Kobe ZIMI on Twitter. How many passing targets does Josh Jacobs get? That's an interesting question. I think that the Raiders would like to start getting him the ball more in that regard. But at the same time, You've got Jalen Richard as a backup, who's good at that part of the game. And then you have Lynn Bowden Jr., who the Raiders drafted out of Kentucky, who could do so many different things. He was a wide receiver for a time at Kentucky. He played some quarterback at Kentucky. Ironically, the Raiders have drafted him at running back in spite of the quarterback wide receiver background in college. But the fact that he played wide receiver shows you that he was a guy that his college team wanted to get him the ball in that regard. So I think Lynn Bowden Jr. at running back, you're going to see him when he does get on the field. You're going to see him targeted in the passing game. He's also going to take some snaps at quarterback in the wildcat formation to let him do damage with his legs and his passing ability. But I think that because of the way, if I should say this, if Lynn Bowden Jr. is able to get command of the playbook and get on the field in the packages that the Raiders, see him excelling in, it might mean Josh Jacobs sometimes coming off the field, and maybe that cuts into his opportunities in the pass game. But that's okay, because I think Josh Jacobs, the way he hurts you the most is in the run game. He'll get his fair share of targets in the passing game, but I think that diversifying and being more versatile is the name of the game, and so I think Lynn Bowden Jr. is going to be a factor in that. But if you were to ask me for Josh Jacobs, I'd say 25, maybe 25 targets. We'll see, and I'll have a better idea when I'm out there watching practice and seeing kind of what they're doing. But right now, I would say right around there, 20, 25, 30 times across the season. Let's go to Kemba at Kemba George. Trying to figure out what that means. Is Paul George Kemba, the Kemba from the Boston Celtics? Maybe I'm completely off base. Anyway, he wants to know if there's any new information or traction on Clowney, and obviously he's talking about Jadeveon Clowney, the free agent defensive end. No, nothing new that I can report. I do know, in consistently checking in on that situation, that the Raiders are definitely on top of it. They're a part of it. They're monitoring it. I think that they have a number in mind that they would welcome Jadeveon Clowney with welcome arms at that number that they prefer. Obviously, Jadeveon Clowney, I'm sure, has a whole other number in mind as far as what he believes he's worth and should be getting. So, an impasse with where Jadeveon is on his worth and where teams are assessing his value and his worth. So until either a team becomes really, really desperate due to injuries, or Clowney just comes to the realization that I'm going to have to play this year more on their terms and my terms, then he'll have a decision to make. But I think the Raiders are involved. They just have to be aware of where they are under the salary cap and make it work on those terms. But I'll tell you what, if they were able to secure him, they're getting a dynamic football player, really, really good at setting the edge and playing the run. He's one of the best defensive ends in that regard, and there's no doubt that he creates push up front, and that's going to benefit the entire defensive line from a rotational standpoint and keeping guys fresh, from a versatility standpoint in terms of being able to move guys, including Clowney, up and down the defensive line of scrimmage. I think it would be a great asset, but again, you have to take into account where the Raiders are on the salary cap and how far they can push it in that regard. Let's go to Vinny Rose at our Vinny T. Obviously love the name Vinny. Always great to see another Vinny. All right, Chenzo, what do we got here? With no preseason, how do fringe guys like Javin White make the team? Well, in Javin's case, number one, so far so good, because he obviously has caught the eye of John Gruden. John Gruden mentioned him when we talked to John last week, and so that's number one. You make the most of your opportunities. You make the most of your chances. When you do get a rep, you make it the best rep that you possibly can, so that when the coaches see it live and in person, and then go back to the film and check it out and say, wow, that dude's making some plays. Wow, that guy makes some plays. Wow, that guy's where he's supposed to be. Wow, that was a great adjustment by him. He's getting it. He's understanding it. This is a guy that we might be able to rely on. Wow, he's continuing to make plays day after day after day, rep after rep after rep. That's how you do it. And unfortunately for a lot of these guys, they didn't have the luxury of a normal off season, so you're not getting by now. By this point in training camp, to put this all in perspective, the Raiders on Wednesday were going to have a light practice, jump on an airplane, and go to Seattle to play the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday, their preseason opener. What? That's crazy, right? Yeah, that's the way the schedule was supposed to play out. But they haven't even gotten into their full pads yet. That's not going to happen until Monday because of COVID-19. And what else did COVID-19 interrupt? Well, there was no real offseason in terms of OTAs, getting on the field, taking what you learn in the classroom onto the field and applying it there and getting yourself on film so that you could go back and look at the film to make some corrections. The coaches can look at the film to see what you're doing and what you're capable of doing. And then on top of that, because of COVID-19, again, there is no preseason. Like Vinny Rose is pointing out, there's no preseason for guys like Jadeveon White and some others to get on the field and show what they can do. I remember talking to Raiders, the fullback Alec Ingold, and during the offseason, it's like, man, imagine if you didn't have OTAs last year in 2019 and mini camps and rookie mini camps and the preseason and all of training camp, all that body work that you get during the season to show your coaches, what you're capable of doing as an undrafted free agent, because that's where Alec was last year. Imagine having to fight that uphill climb without the benefit of all those type of practices. And he understands, like, man, that would have been tough. No guarantee that he would have even made the team because of that. Now, the one, I wouldn't call it a positive, but the one thing to keep an eye on is they're expanding the practice roster, each team's practice roster, because of the fact that, look, let's face it, due to injuries, due to whatever impact COVID-19 might have on your roster on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis, we don't know what the testing is going to look like as this season unfolds. They're going to expand the practice roster so that there's more available players that you can utilize and tap into. If a guy like Jadeveon White or any of the other undrafted free agents don't make the team, the 53-man roster, there's extra slots available for them on the practice squad, so that could help their chances of sticking around, and then as the course of the season goes on, kind of making up the time that they lost in OTAs and minicamp and the condensed training camp to now be able to show on a daily basis, what they're capable of doing and the opportunities that they're going to get. And keep in mind that every practice is filmed, man. Every single practice from every angle that you could possibly think of is being caught on camera. So that's why, players are taught, like, don't take any reps off, man. The eye in the sky does not lie. And coaches scour that throughout the season on a daily basis, not only to see what their starters are doing, not only to see what their backups are doing, but how are the young guys progressing? How are they taking what we're teaching them and applying it to the field in a way that, hey, are we going to be able to count on this guy? If we have to go to the practice squad to bring somebody up, is that guy going to be able to be where he's supposed to be and make the tackle or run the right route or make the right read with his quarterback based on the coverage that they're seeing? So all of that is easily identifiable throughout practice because it's being taped and everything is scripted and organized, and the coaches know what play goes to what. All of that is taken care of, and it's on the players to show in those situations whether they're getting it mentally and obviously physically. And so those are opportunities for this expanded practice squad when we get to that point for guys to really, not solidify themselves, but plant the seed, like, hey, I'm a good player. I could be counted on. I'm doing the right thing. I'm being diligent. I'm keeping my head in the playbook. And so, it's going to be an uphill climb for a lot of these guys, but at the very least, they have that extra leeway on the practice squad to maybe stick around a little bit longer, to show what they're capable of doing. Let's go to Steve Cardoso, at Steve Cardoso 7 on Twitter. With Greg Olson's recent comments on Ruggs playing in the slot, does that mean we're going to see less of Hunter Renfrow in 2020? I hope not, considering he was such a reliable weapon out of the slot and is only going to get better. I'm glad you asked this, Steve, and I'll tell you why. That sort of, made his way around social media as if Henry Ruggs was solidified in the slot. It's not the case. Yes, he will see some time in the slot. There's a lot of different ways that they're going to use Henry Ruggs, but by no means is he, at least to my knowledge thus far, the starting slot wide receiver. That's Hunter Renfro's position. Henry Ruggs is going to be playing the position that Antonio Brown was supposed to play last year. That's where he's going to line up, to my knowledge anyway. So I think that kind of caught a little bit fire, or people saw that and meant, oh my gosh, Henry Ruggs is going to play the slot. What does that mean for Hunter Renfro? I think a little too much was read into that comment by Greg Olsen. I think he was basically just trying to say, hey, we've got some versatility now, guys that can play up and down the wide receiver chart, and Henry Ruggs being one of them, Brian Edwards another one. I think you're going to see Brian Edwards in the slot as well. So there's going to be a lot of different formations, a lot of different personnel packages, but Henry Ruggs is not the starting slot wide receiver. I'd be shocked if that were to happen. Let's see. I think that's all we have for right now. If you have any more questions, by all means, keep them coming. Let me see what we have over here. Thank you for your contributions, by the way. But it looks like we're clear for the time being. So I appreciate all the questions, and we're going to do this on a weekly basis, whether it's myself or some of my colleagues, Adam Hill and Ed Graney and Heidi Fang. We're all going to be here on a weekly basis to answer your questions. Bill Bradley, our sports editor. So we're going to be here throughout the season and off season and on and on and on and on. So get those questions ready, and we encourage you to be a part of it. Thank you very much.